Welcome to Master Planning for MultiSite Ministry. I'm Tom Greenwood. I'm an architect and principal with the Beck Group in Dallas. And let me introduce our panel for you today. Starting over here, we have Brad Stovall, who's the pastor of operations for Fellowship Church, main campus here in Grapevine, and they have 5 campuses operating in a multi-site model. And we're glad to have Brad as a part of it. You're going to hear a lot of his learning experiences. He's been a part of developing every one of those campuses. Next to him is Jeff Otero. Jeff is with Strategic Dimensions. I think his title on the card says Senior Strategist, whatever that means.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, it's a big title, but he's worth every bit of that title, though. Strategic Dimensions has assisted churches all over the country, many of them multi-site, in putting together, formulating strategic plans for their ministries, and has a lot of background to share with us today. Then John Paul DeFrank. John Paul is the other half of myself and our role at Beck. John Paul is a principal with our architectural group. We co-lead our church group there. As they like to say, we're the Wayne and Garth of the Beck group. And you can figure out which one is which here.
Where's your mullet?
And then, but John Paul himself has been through a lot of those learning curves from the very early days when we first did our first multi-site campus, but has a lot of insights to share there. Then next to him we have Doug Sluiter, and Doug is the, and I know I'm going to get this wrong, Doug, but executive pastor, I think, relative to
Campus support
services, which means everything related to facilities, a lot to do with operations. And Doug has been integral in development of 2 of Gateway's campuses, really their 2 latest campuses, major campuses, and is a real key component in helping them formulate a expansion of their multi-site strategy, which we're going to talk some more about today too. When it comes to the multi-site movement, for those of you, well, let me ask first of all, how many of you are in churches that are doing multi-site currently? Got a few of you here. How about architects, engineers, anything like that in the group? Okay. If for those of you that have been fortunate, like myself, to have been raised in a Christian home, been an integral part of a church for my entire life, really, and you've reached the age I have, I won't say exactly what that is.
Yeah, what age is that, Tom?
36.
Again?
Yeah, but and again, been blessed to work with churches for 20 plus years now. We've seen those trends in the church world come and go. I'm just old enough to have seen the end of kind of the golden age of denominations and Sunday school and all that, seen facilities built around that, saw the emergence of the Jesus people, saw the emergence of the megachurch phenomena in America, and all those things in between. But really the multi-site movement is one that's been one of the most amazing to me to see take off, and really the speed at which it's taken off, how it's been adopted, how it's already been adapted in many different ways. And I can remember as few as maybe 4 or 5 years ago, people in the business we're in still saying, well, this multi-site thing, we'll see if it lasts. It's kind of a flash in the pan. But one thing that is kind of interesting to look at, and I don't know if y'all can read this graphic here because of the scale of it, but it's a chart kind of showing the growth of a couple of different movements. One being on the lower bar, that kind of goldish brown color bar is mega churches. And if you look at the point at which that movement really began to take off back in the late 70s, early 80s, when there were really just a handful of what we define as mega churches, tracking forward to today, 30 years later, and there's over 1,300 mega churches. And again, all the experts say that's certainly one of the most significant movements in American Christianity we've seen, certainly in our generation. But then you look at what has happened with multi-site just in the last 10 to 12 years. Again, you go back to around the 2000, there were a handful of multi-site churches in the U.S. and today there's over 3,000 of those types of congregations. That's a pretty steep curve of growth, no doubt. We'd all like to be in that business. But the thing about that, to have that kind of rapid growth means a lot of people are learning on the job. Have any of y'all experienced that in your multi-site ministries? And you're looking for ideas, right? You're looking for ways to get your handle around this, to be ahead of the next campus you start, and not making the same mistakes again. And that's why we thought this idea of really being able to put a master plan around a multi-site strategy before you launch is so important. Again, a lot of what you're going to hear today has just been on-the-job experience, learning from the mistakes you made, but also learning what worked. And so that's kind of what we wanted this discussion to be about today, is to let you tap into some of that expertise, see what people have experienced so you don't make the same mistakes, and being able to put together, as we think of a master plan, it's really just the idea of developing an effective strategy, that defines some essential elements. There's a number of those elements. We've broken them down to some simple ones today: what, when, where, and how. And you're going to hear varying shades of that in the presentation today. We're also going to give you a chance at the end to ask questions. So if you've got a burning question, you came here today to get answered, then this is a great group, as good as any as I'd know, to address those kind of questions too. So why don't we start with that? We're going to start with the idea of what really is multi-site in your context, and the way that we want to start that conversation is to get Brad and Doug to talk a little bit about their respective churches, how they do multi-site, and begin to relate back to us what helped form their decisions to become the kind of multi-site church they are, and maybe some ways they've morphed over time as well. So Brad, I'm going to start with you, and start out, just tell us a little bit about a Fellowship Church, your young church. When did y'all really jump into the multi-site movement?
Well, I was hired in 2003, and I'm pretty sure Pastor Young had already looked at many other churches that have been doing it. We've always been the church not to eat the mushrooms first. We like for those to go out and try them. I think North Point was the church at the time that we had taken a look at and liked their way of doing things. And for us, we had expanded, and we had the 3 services on Sunday, and then we'd also had the 2 services on Saturday night. And I think just from a funnel, you can only bring in so many people at those strategic service times, and we 80% in the worship center, and there was no more children's space. And at the time, we just saw more and more growth happening outside of the area, and it just seemed like, when you really do look back, even on the first row of our church, we are such a video, element that you're not looking at the pastor anymore. You're looking at the side screens because they're so large, because they're so vibrant. They just take your eye. So we just loved what North Point was doing. Just felt like it was the greatest opportunity for us to expand. We had looked at, I think, John Paul, you and I were just talking about it at that time before I was brought on. You had looked at expansion at our current facility, and I just think for dollar, it just looked like going out and finding a facility that was already up. We could remodel it, and we could go. Or you want me to go ahead and get into Plano and all of them?
Yeah, your first campus was in Plano.
It was Fellowship Plano.
Yeah.
It was a beast. It was 110,000 square foot existing. At the time, it was a Fujitsu, but it had previously been a furniture store, so it was 55,000 in the front and 55 in the back. And I think for that one, we just felt like the fellowship, the atrium and the space and all that, we were going to take advantage of that. So I think for that facility, what I would say we learned from it, what we would say we'd do again, is to be a little bit smaller. And also with that one, we went in and we just gutted the facility, knocked it all down. And I think even Dallas, and the last one that we did was Fort Worth, we pretty much used the existing facility to make it fit. What we had done for the Plano campus in Dallas and also the Fort Worth is we used the Technology Fellowship One at the time, and we would take data, and what we do at a church is we try to come up with any reason, whether you're coming in to do a giveaway or for whatever reason, to get the data. So we really we count. I cannot stress how much we count, and we believe in the accuracy, and we take it to heart, and we're very adamant about that. And so it was pretty easy for us to run the query and find out where our people were coming from. And then, the vision that Ed gave to take the church to a satellite facility and to, take the message. We had the branding. I think for us, in the Dallas-Fort Worth, the Fellowship Church brand was pretty strong, and I think that's been one thing that we've fought at every campus, is that the Fellowship Church you have in Grapevine is the Fellowship Church you have in Dallas and Fort Worth. Miami didn't happen until 2006 or 7, but that's how we approached those first three.
And so you started your first satellite campus 2003, 2004?
2005, I believe, is when Plano opened.
Okay. I think maybe 2004, as I remember, we were starting to try to find sites.
Yes. We started looking in 2004. We got it in September. We opened it in January. Opened it on the strategic time. So.
Yeah, and then when did you roll out the other campuses? Do you remember how far apart?
Well, now we opened up Plano and Dallas same day. Now, what we did in Dallas, though, is we started in a rented facility, which was the North Dallas High School, and then within 3 months in Easter, we started at Northwest ISD for our Fort Worth campus. I do believe that brought the value of also bringing in the volunteers. What we had to do at the Plano campus is we basically took 200 strong families and said, we're asking for a 6-month commitment. I would say 80% of them all stayed out there just because they were so close. But we said, we want you to commit to serving at this campus, and just having that volunteer support on the opening day strong was a big deal.
Yeah. Now, you guys jumped out there too and started a campus way outside of Texas. Miami, Texas, Miami, Florida.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about how that came about.
For those of you that don't know our pastor, Ed Jung, he is a huge fisherman, played at Florida State, so Miami has always been his heart, and I think, for the longest time he's always prayed, to have a church there, and through some connections through the C3 Global, we found a Baptist church that had lost their pastor. Really, it was just a daycare that had turned in, a church that had turned into a daycare, and they were missing a pastor. They reached out to us, and we were able to go down there and talk to them, and then we brought them to our Dallas facility. They really enjoyed it, but for that facility it was different because we didn't have the brand down there. So I think from there we sent staff as quickly as we could to get inside the community to establish relationships, and TV was a big part. We radio and TV, we really pushed for the local channels to get started down there, and I think that was 2006.
And how do y'all do the services now? What's kind of your strategy? How do you use technology? You have live worship? Is it simulcast? Preaching? Kind of what do y'all do now?
Well, the technology is, Streambox, but we do live worship. So, it is when Ed goes on at Grapevine through when Ed gets off, whether he does the offering, we're a very flexible church, and, we've got to watch our pastor's cues. So if he's going to pass the offering ball off, then we'll let the campus pastors go. But typically the music is, 15 to 20 minutes in the beginning, and then it is synced to when Ed gets up live. It goes live everywhere, including the Miami campus. In the beginning, before the technology, we felt was really there, we would actually mail the DVDs. We were doing the, counter-to-counter freight to Miami there for quite a while with American, because we want the experience to be whatever happens at Grapevine is happening at Dallas. And so what we have is a meeting with our worship pastors. They meet on Tuesday. Every one of them comes together. We have, a worship pastor who's over all of them, but what is exactly the same song. Now, obviously, vocals sometimes will play a little difference in what they can do, but they still keep with the same, theme of the song, whether it's a high beat or a low beat song. So pretty much our music is the same. Now, we have the same children's curriculum. So we write the curriculum, so everything is the same. All of our policies, all of our signage, everything that we try to produce at Grapevine gets replicated to every campus.
All right, Doug, let's hear a little bit about Gateway Church and how y'all got into MultiSite.
Well, first I'm thinking Brad's reading my notes, or I'm reading your notes. There's a similarity. I came in 2006, and we opened our first extension campus in 2007. So for all of you that are thinking on coming on staff at church as a facilities manager, plan on an expansion 12 months after you get there. That's what we've experienced. Gateway's first step into extension campus was the North Richland Hills campus, and in essence, basically, it was an overflow room. Like Fellowship, we had limited capacity at our South Lake campus. We were maxed out with decent service times to offer. We were doing 3 Saturday services and 3 Sunday morning services. And the NRH campus was, in essence, an overflow. A very successful overflow in that NRH right now, any given weekend, we have 4,500 to 5,000 people in attendance at an overflow room. And so, we saw the NRH model and said that's a pretty big success. And it took off some of the pressure that we had on our then current South Lake campus. We've since expanded our South Lake campus to a 4,000 seat room, a new facility on a new greenfield site. While we were in the midst of that project and that campus growing, we had an opportunity up in Frisco with a church that came to us and said, we'd like to be adopted by Gateway. And we said, of course, we're gonna adopt you. And so we ended up opening another campus, or an extension campus in Frisco. We have a little different model that we use, and we use different vernacular. Our NRH campus is an extension campus, which is in essence an overflow. We do live worship at each campus, and Pastor Robert teaches live at the South Lake campus, and we have fiber connectivity between the campuses, and there's a little bit of a delay just because of technology, but in essence, once Pastor is teaching, that's broadcast to each campus live. At the close, then Pastor Robert has the invitation, folks come forward for prayer, and at that point he transitions to the campus pastor at South Lake and at all of the extension campuses. So, and in overflow rooms if we happen to have overflow at any one of the campuses. So it's a little bit different model in that it's not a live synced worship and a synced teaching. Once every 4 to 6 weeks, we will do a synced worship where we have the on the video screens in either campus, you'll see the other campuses. And there's a synergy that's built around that, and that ties in the family of Gateway. Even though you're 20 miles away at a different campus, it's one church, multiple campuses. And we really strive to push that and push that Gateway DNA. I heard you talking about you guys produce everything in Grapevine and pass it out to we try and do that same thing in South Lake, where it's the Gateway DNA. It's just how we do things, and our children's pastors and our worship team and the printed media, whatever it is, we try and keep consistency so that there is that same feeling, that same environment, no matter which campus it is. We were not as strategic in the North Richland Hills and Frisco, in that North Richland Hills was just a pent-up demand. We couldn't handle the capacity at our South Lake campus, and we did a zip code study and said, hey, where are our folks coming from? North Richland Hills was a good target. We did a couple of different site evaluations before we landed on that location, and it was an old Winn-Dixie grocery store, 50-some thousand square feet. We renovated it. We have a children's space, an auditorium for the adults, and then that one is a heavy youth component because our South Lake campus didn't even have youth. We really focused youth at the NRH campus. There are no offices, no admin, no pastor's offices on that campus. That is truly an extension campus. The Frisco campus, because of geographical distance, again, we have children and youth similar to what we have at the NRH and South Lake campus now. The auditorium is consistent with what we do at South Lake, but because of the distance, we have offices there and we have pastoral staff there that are part of that community. And although the teaching and the materials we use are consistent with what we have in South Lake, we have a local presence in that office. All of the administrative functions still come out of the South Lake campus. So it's a little bit different than an extension, and that would be a satellite model. And we're about to step into that out of the state and you and I should get together afterwards so I can learn from your experience on that. And we've targeted Arizona as the next step, and it's a church plant, and it's a different model yet again than the satellite or the extensions, and it's in its early infancy and development, and we're going to glean some from how you experienced in Miami and how that works.
Yeah. Let me pick up a little bit on that. Both of you mentioned DNA to the congregation, to the vision as kind of being important in the facility you move into as well. Kind of identifying a facility, but also, I mean, Doug, you mentioned your Frisco campus. Now it's been a work in progress because that was an existing church, and not just culturally, but I mean the building itself was reflective of that culture, of that DNA before. So tell us some more about, I mean, how important it is to think of DNA when you're looking at buildings even, and what kind of building makes sense for you.
It's key that you look at your programs and how you do church. If you have a strong children's program, if you have a strong youth program, if you have a strong adult ed program, if you have a combined service and a breakout service, how you do church and how that facility supports what you do. In the Frisco situation there, their programming, how they functioned was different than how we function. So I think if you look on the screen on the slide, that's a fairly current picture where you see the artist or the painter doing some work in the hallway. That's within the last month. Now, Frisco's been part of the Gateway family for about 16, 18 months now, and we're still investing into that campus. The technology, we're spending a fair amount of dollars on the audio and video component because it's important. Being a video campus, being a remote campus, what you see on the screen has to be high quality stuff. And so we want to make certain that the gear that's there can support that and give a higher end image on that campus. Parking, all those things are integrated into how we do church. Would we, if we could go back 2 years or a year and a half and look at the Frisco opportunity, I think we'd be happy to take the church, maybe a little less eager to take the facility and look at a different solution from an answer there. But it came as a package deal, and so we're tweaking it and adjusting as we go.
Yeah. Let me pick up on that and get Jeff and John Paul to weigh in too. I mean, Jeff, from your perspective, first of all, helping churches think through a strategic plan. Sometimes you think the kind of facility that's going to make sense gets lost a little bit.
Yeah, no, it's, I think the thing to remember is that going multi-site is one of many possible solutions to dealing with the growth of your church. I mean, if you look at the chart that Tom showed earlier and just think about how multi-site has rolled out over the last few years, most of the pioneers, and actually even what you guys have talked about, their first multi-site ventures were all just out of need. I mean, they were growing, they were out of space, they were doing as many services as they could, and basically got an opportunity came up to go multi-site or got pushed into that as maybe the only viable option at the moment. So there wasn't some kind of a trend. They weren't imitating somebody else. And so there's lots of different ways you can handle it. Multi-site's one. And then there's a lot of other varieties within multi-site about how you handle it. I don't want to trump what John Paul's going to say because you'll talk about due diligence. But if you are looking at existing buildings or sites or anything like that, you definitely got to do your homework. And then, Doug and Brad talked about DNA. What you're doing has got to fit your DNA, but it's also got to fit your leadership structure, how you're organized. How are you going to govern multiple sites? If you're an elder-led church, for instance, do you have elders at each site? How do they work together? How are decisions made? Is there anything that's done on a local basis? Is it all centrally, command and control from the main campus? How is money handled? How are budget funds divvied up among the things? There's so many questions to answer. As you think about that, the facility is certainly a big piece of it, but there's a lot of other ones too.
Well, from a due diligence standpoint, of course, I'm always thinking about just the structure, but we get into these discussions a lot of time and people automatically assume, well, if we buy an existing structure, it's going to be cheaper, right? Well, that's not always true. I think we need to make sure that we're strategic in our thinking in terms of, is it new construction or is it renovation? With if you look at an example like Plano, we had a really great facility that was already pretty much ready to go from an infrastructure standpoint. Was being groomed to be a data facility essentially for Fujitsu to come in there and have a server farm essentially. So the electrical was really in great shape. There was because it was an old warehouse, it was super high structure. So it turned out to be a really nice opportunity for an auditorium because you have a lot of vertical height. Of course, when we did the NRH Extension Campus for Gateway Church, it was a little bit the opposite because it was an old grocery store. Truth be told, I did the grocery store originally, so thankfully I got an opportunity to turn it into something better.
God redeemed your earlier work.
God redeemed my earlier work. So thank you very much. But I was fortunate enough to work with Doug on that project, but we had a lot of different challenges. You would think, well, with a grocery store, well, it had tons of MEP, right? Well, yes, but not in the right place and not the right kind, and the structure was quite low. And there were just substantial challenges. The one good thing is we had a good parking field out front that we could call on, that we didn't have to construct. So all these different things sort of weigh into it. So when you weigh, the decision to build or to renovate, the cost of the facility, the cost of the renovation, there's inevitability, there's zoning that might have to take place. There's some timetable there because maybe we have to special use permit. But those are the kind of things I'd make sure that we would want to talk about if we were going to discuss an opportunity with you to do a multi-site.
Yeah. Well,
can I just on that for fellowship with our first being the Plano and having the 40-foot ceilings, I think that experience helped us draw back and go, wow, that's too tall, it's a cavernous feeling. And we just at that time we were all about the tall ceiling, and as you talked about, John Paul, with the columns and just all line of sight, because for us that center screen is the most important thing. That is our pastor. We take that to heart. But for us, now that we've been able to come up with our model and we see a size of a worship center, we've got the Fort Worth where it seats 400. We've got, the Dallas where it seats, 900. And then you've got, the 1,600 out in Plano. We see that Dallas campus and also the Miami has the 600 as a sweet spot. And that's the great thing about working with the Beck group, and if you've got a partnership with another one, is to be able to say, okay guys, let's work backwards. We want this size worship center, what else do we need? Because they know our program so well, so we know right off the bat whether or not the facility, we go to our real retail guy and say, this is the size we need, this is where we want to be, and then we can work backwards. But for Fort Worth, and where you do have, maybe the clash of the architect who wants to have the nice building, and I know Beck is, they shake their heads at us because we want a plain Jane building every time. That's what we'll come and let the children's and let all those guys with our artwork produce, the color. But we fought hard on Fort Worth to say, no, we're going to make this building work. This building is going to work. We're going to make these classrooms work to our size. And we even got so, with our children's team and said, no, you're going to have to break up. You're going to have to get more volunteers to make more classrooms work. And instead of having 12 kids in a room, you're going to have 6 in this room and 6 in this room. But the cost savings, and quite frankly, seeing the success that Fort Worth has with the way that campus is rolled out with, I would say, the intimacy, it's been quite fun to watch. And so now we see what works. So for any of you guys, it's to get out there and to visit all the satellites that are doing it and see what fits your DNA, because I think in the beginning with Plano we weren't quite sure what we want. Now we feel better about going, and we can just work backward into it. And as we all know, the older sites, the more headaches.
Yeah. Let me change the direction a little bit. Talk about timing. Talk about when, and I know, Jeff, you probably definitely have some things because you deal with strategic planning and phasing of things for churches, helping them understand all the components. What are some important things to think about in terms of timing? When's the best time to launch a new campus or even jump into multi-site? Do you have some thoughts there?
Well, I guess the first question would be, do you need to expand? Don't jump into multi-site because it's the cool thing and everybody's doing it. Do you actually need to expand? Are you doing as many services as you can do in your existing facilities? Have you maxed out what you already have? If you really have, then you're looking at options for how do you continue to accommodate the growth that God is bringing to your church. So then the question becomes, well, what can we afford to do? What can we reasonably afford to raise in a capital campaign? How much money do we have in the bank? Do we already have existing debt? So what resources are available to you? You've got to have a realistic picture of what you've got to spend on something. And then you've got to look at your leadership too. I mean, it's, you've got to launch a multi-site, a new campus. You've got to seed that campus. Brad talked about, recruiting 200 families from their existing campus and sending them out to this new place. You've got to have volunteers and lay leaders in this place. You've got to have probably a campus pastor and a worship leader and all these things. Where are they going to come from? Do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the bench strength in your existing staff and your existing volunteers to move those people out? So that's also a readiness factor. And then part of it's just the opportunity. You say, okay, we think we're going to start looking in this area. You start praying about it. You maybe start putting leads out. You maybe get a real estate person who's out looking for an opportunity, and then before you know it, something might come up. But having all that homework done ahead of time, knowing what you can afford, knowing what you need, knowing what kind of leadership you're going to put in there, having your playbook in a sense kind of written, you're ready to move when the opportunity strikes.
If I can chime in here, I think Jeff hits a really key important thing that we're working on. And when you master plan, I don't want to downplay at all the sticks and bricks part of it, because that is important. But you're taking a piece of your church, your organization, and you're planning it over there. So to have staff that has your DNA, that does things the way that you do church, and at Gateway, it takes 3 to 5 years of a pastor being on staff and being part of our organization before you get to that point where you say they really got the DNA, they really have it. So when you start thinking master planning multi-sites, if you're going to do, if your vision that God's laid on your heart is 3 or 4 campuses in the next 5 years, you need to start thinking about what pastors you're going to put out there, what kind of volunteer structure, children's structure, worship structure are you going to put out there, and how many people have you got on your staff today in a training position to be that plant, to make that thing go. That's probably one of our tougher challenges.
No, that's for sure. I mean, that's something I know Ed will challenge us on regularly, is who are we pouring into? Where is the next Brad? Because you never know. Even if I go, what's the hole going to be at Grapevine if I was to go to another one? So there has to be always someone we're pouring into. But you're exactly right. Every facility that we've looked at, we will always try to send from Grapevine that have had, with our children's and our spiritual development, that have had 3 years or so in that team to learn from Tian and our Mike Johnsons, that can then go and take that same DNA. You're exactly right, Doug.
That's a great point. I mean, to think of even a time frame. You say, Brad, you're looking at about a 3-year. You'd like for people to have about 3 years experience in the organization and at some level to be ready to go to that campus. I'm wondering, John Paul, what do churches need to be thinking about from the practical side of it, identifying property, doing due diligence, and maybe compare to an existing building, a grocery store, versus going to a greenfield site where you could possibly build something new.
Well, I would say new construction is always easiest because we have the control of everything there. With maybe the exception of staring at our civil engineer, maybe with the exception of providing utilities to the site. Really, if you were able to control everything on the site, that's a great position to be in, and you can move very quickly. We were fortunate enough to design and construct the Potter's House for T.D. Jakes. And we designed and constructed that building in about 14 months. So it's about 200,000 square feet. So that's an amazing sort of thing. But it was able to, the ground was ready. We were able to get in there and move quite quickly. We didn't have to petition the city for any sort of special permits or anything. And you just really never know when you're going to get into an existing facility what you're going to come up against. I mean, we've had some environmental concerns, certainly, in some of our buildings that we've looked at, where asbestos is still a part of key consideration in purchasing a building. There's some time to do that, certainly. So we can move very, very quickly in a new construction, sort of environment. But you just never know with an existing building. When you start tearing down walls, you never know what you're going to find. So.
Yeah. And I know. Our customers are always totally optimistic and depend a lot on us, right? To do miracles
your business
in terms of
development
schedule.
guys say you walk on water. And
So
There's shallow water.
We can get it
Yeah,
done in a
shallow.
month. Done in a month.
Yeah, but
uh,
for some churches, especially, for us, we like to look at the life around the church, whether they have the eating establishments, because, there are so many churches, that put themselves in a particular spot where, I would say, there is no chance for that family to go anywhere after services. And when we find, like in the downtown Dallas and the downtown Fort Worth area, the life, and so you do have to look at sometimes existing because the land's just not available anymore.
Yeah, and that's a great segue to the next one, which is where's the best place for a new site? I mean, how did you go about determining that?
Doug, I really liked your strategy. When we met recently, you described your move to the edge of the dots scenario. Yeah. Can you describe that for us a little bit?
It's a simple zip code study, and we looked at where our current congregation was coming from, where our current members are coming from, and we said, you know what, we've got a pretty heavy concentration of folks here. Let's look in this region, and that was part of what drove us to the North Richland Hills campus. And when we open that campus, we look at that, what I call my blueberry map, because each individual is represented with a blue dot on the map. I look at my blueberry map pre-NRH, and I look at it post-NRH, and I see some growth, and it goes in this direction. So that kind of says to me, hey, I think we can support another campus in that general area. One of the other things that we do factor in, we have a relationship with a lot of other churches. They're Connect Church to Gateway, and we want to be sensitive to that too. We're not in competition with other churches for attendance. So if there's a Gateway Connect or a Gateway family church in that proximity, we're not going to go park one right in their backyard, even though the ideal piece of property might be there. That is part of that consideration as well, is what else is in that community. I like what you said about infrastructure, social environment around there to support it. What are you competing with from a parking standpoint? If you need overflow parking, which always seems to be one of our challenges, John, what are we competing with for parking? What are we competing with from other churches? What are we competing with in that community besides just the church environment? All those things factor in, but probably the biggest driver is where are we right now? Where Gateway is currently located, we have in the Dallas area here, we have the DFW airport as kind of this big boundary to the east of us, and we got Lake Grapevine as this big boundary to the north of us. So we're really pushed in that direction. Although we have a fair amount of folks that come from the other side of the lake, and we need to look at that and say, what do we do about those boundaries, and how do we take those out of play as well? So that does drive some of the consideration in the long-term master planning of where that next campus is going to be.
Do you have any kind of a rule, either one of your churches, in terms of how far you want to be at a minimum in terms of drive time or distance or anything like that?
No, I mean, for us, because, with the expansions of the roads and the highways around here, but even it's so funny to look at our little, the dot map and see the Fort Worth and how, that might expand to 15 miles, and you can see a heavy population, where if you look at our Dallas, the dot map is not reflective because no one in Dallas likes to drive. I mean, you put them in traffic and they won't drive up 35 or Woodall. You just won't see it. And so, you have to be careful what you say is that boundary, because nowadays with the highways going where they are, 121 almost now clear up to the Plano campus, and that is just seeing the expansion. So we watch the infrastructure more than we would the actual mileage and the community, because Dallas is such a stay at home. I mean, that's just the way this community is.
John Paul, if you had to list kind of your top 5 things that the churches should be looking at when they're evaluating a property, let's start with an existing building. What would those be?
Well, just ease of renovation, probably. When you evaluate the skin of a building, the energy codes, of course, just getting a lot more stringent. I mean, we've really fought this recently with some of our recent work with Gateway Church. Your skins that are even 5-6 years old don't even meet the standards of today for energy consumption and efficiency requirements. I can't really stress due diligence enough. You can really get bitten. There's probably 5 key things within due diligence that, or if I'd say due diligence 5 times, that's really probably just the key for me is, evaluating the skin, really looking at the roof, Because when you think about, a tariff and replace for a roof is $7 or $8 a square foot, minimum, that's a huge cost if you have, area under a roof of about 50,000 square feet like we do at the NRH campus. That's an enormous investment just right off the top that you have to take out of your ministry budget. So when we're counting those costs, those are the kind of things that I really want to make sure that we evaluate properly before we make a recommendation.
Yeah. One thing I'd add to it too is the parking.
Yeah.
Is always a huge one. I know we've gone through some challenges, some of these sites where you've got to go with simple pieces of that. I don't know if Brad, you want to talk any
Well,
of that about
no,
some of the
I mean, that's
challenges you
just-
faced in Fort Worth, for instance.
And that exactly. We're going through the rezoning and things issues right now, and just trying to find that shared parking. And it's interesting when we went in there, we knew the parking that we had on site would fit the scale we wanted, but to ever expand, we had a little bit more acreage to pave. But seeing that shared parking, and now when we see the whole community is redoing this whole new development and trying to get ahead of them and saying, look, we want to partner with you because our peak times and their peak times don't match. And Buckhead, great example in Atlanta, did a great shared parking, and we took them because that parking is expensive and it is critical. And trying to bus people in the rain and moving them around in golf carts, it's painful.
Well, you can never have enough parking. We talk about ratios all the time. It used to be 1 to 3, then it was 1 to 2, and the work that we've done for these two churches recently are below 1 to 2. Even, most of yours is like 1 to 1.7.
No.
So it's really kind of staggering. And then when you think about, at your peak hour, you have multiple people, many people saying multiple hours. That ratio really gets diluted even further because, people aren't just coming for one worship hour and leaving. It's really just puts greater and greater demand on the need for larger parking fields.
And I'm going to echo, I think, what one of y'all said earlier. Count. Get your numbers, get your
you've
numbers,
gotta have
get
the
your
data.
numbers.
Yeah.
Get that data where you're currently at. Your children's to adult ratio, adult to parking ratio. We count cars in the parking lot every weekend. We count adults. And to all the pastors here, have one of your deacons count, because I've seen pastors count and
No pastor numbers.
no pastor numbers.
Round up.
They
Round
got to be
up.
real numbers because, those inflated numbers, yeah. But
Ministerially speaking. Yeah.
seriously, you got to get actual numbers, real numbers, because that drives
Yeah.
your financial decisions. It drives
Space
how much-
planning.
Space
Yep.
planning.
Yep.
So historical data is so good. The first slide you had up, it gave you a history of the megachurch, and it goes back 20 years or whatever. When you start looking and forecasting forward, it kind of tells the story of the megachurch future, assuming all things stay as they are. Same thing with your attendance, same thing with your parking ratios and your children's ratios. So if there's anything you take away today, count.
And then I would add to that, if you are looking at a location that's substantially different from where you currently are, look at the demographics and look at the culture
Yes.
where that is, because the parking ratios could vary a lot depending on if you're going from a suburban to an urban location or vice versa. The ratios of children to adults could vary a lot. If you're going to a place where maybe there's a lot of new housing and new families moving in, you could have a lot more kids, and so you don't want to undersize your children's facilities by using numbers from your existing campus. So you got to look at how that may differ from where you are.
A great example of that's Fort Worth is 30% and Dallas is maybe 15%.
Yeah,
So
yeah, completely different.
Yeah, and Doug, I want to put you on the spot here. Your NRH campus, I know when we went in and we tried to use a model like similar to what you had on your current campus.
I wasn't gonna air all that,
Yeah.
but thank you. We did take our Southlake children to adult ratios and applied it to our NRH campus. And shortly after we moved in, we said, hey, this isn't working. The children's areas are overflowing and the auditorium's about where it should be. And then we started looking at the demographics of that region and said, well, that explains everything. Younger community, more children, so those ratios are different. So you do have to apply the local demographic component with it as well.
Yeah, and that information is readily available
Oh,
from your school boards.
Sure.
In terms of your children and all your different age groups, and so that's a good first place to start.
Yes.
So churches heard all this, they've identified the site. what's the practical way to begin to put a plan together then? Your perspective, well, and Jeff, why don't we start on your side? The kind of information you help churches model. I mean, what's the information they need to put together a strategy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it is starting with the historical. So what do your finances look like? What does giving look like? What do your attendance figures look like for all the different age groups? And so you take all that and you factor that into how much money you're going to have to invest in something, but then also how you're going to plan the facilities. How much space do I need for kids and everything? You've also got to do some growth projections. And I think you can also take into account, once you've done your blueberry map, if yours are blue, or red hots if it's something else, look at how the populations are growing in those different areas. And you can factor in, if we siphon off a whole bunch of people from the main campus, what's that going to do here? What kind of space does that open up? And then think about what the growth is going to be at the new place. So you can project all that out. We do projections typically on the order of 5, 10, 15 years, looking out in the future for finances, for worship attendance, for kids attendance, and how that's going to change over time, so you can make sure that the facility you're getting or location you're going into is going to have enough space and that you can support it financially.
But from you guys' perspective,
once you've identified you're going to do that, again, like I said earlier, having the staff in place is key.
Yeah.
That's just a key component. How are you going to pay for it? You're seeding a new church, and that church isn't going to pay for itself day one. It may over time grow, but how are you going to pay for it? For us, because of the technology connection that we have using fiber, that's an important piece. Making certain that infrastructure is there to support that.
It's a big investment.
It is a big investment.
Yeah.
And then surround yourself with the right team of people. Getting the right players at the table, and I'm not boasting on these guys because I'm sitting here with them. I'm sitting here with them because they are who they are, and they bring to us the level of service and quality that they do bring. But get yourself the right team at the table to help you design it and execute it.
Echo that.
okay. I kind of already put you on the spot, Doug, so I won't ask you for any more confessions of mistakes. But let's hear from these other guys. I mean, John Paul, maybe something on an existing on a building we went in to evaluate that in retrospect we should have looked at this closer, maybe as a learning. You don't have to name the church, but it's true confessions time.
Well, I'll talk around it. No, just kidding. I'm not sure that in terms of reevaluating any one or multiple decisions of a previous project, I think I'd probably give some advice relative to schedule. Just in terms of developing these projects and the time that it takes. There are millions of decisions that have to be made, and there's time for prayer, real consideration and feedback from your owners is really critical, and we need to make sure that we build in the proper time to sort of take a breath occasionally.
Yeah.
Because one thing that, yes, there is a finite amount of money, typically in fees, and churches are anxious to get going and get their projects finished and occupy those spaces. But I think Doug always talks about, we pay that tuition on one project, we don't want to pay it again. We pay it one time, well, let's learn from that, right? So we might have rushed, I think, too often on some projects, but working with Doug recently, we sort of schedule in times where we take a breath. We can kind of really give the project over to the church and say, look, let's spend some time together really considering the decisions that have been made to date, allow you to have the opportunity to go to the congregation, to go to your elders, and really think about what's been laid before them. Time to really consider how their children's ministries or their adult ministries, or how they're going to staff a program, from a day-to-day standpoint, and make sure that the building is responsive to that. Rather than just rush to the end and be so concerned about the dollars and time, go. I think that's really important that you build in that time to take a breath.
That's good. Yeah. Brad, how about you? I mean, anything as y'all been through this and been doing it now for 7-8 years, I mean, what are some of the lessons coming back?
Flexibility for us. I mean, really and truly, when it comes down to is we don't program and get too driven on this is going to be the way this room is going to be used. It's all about flexibility. Every pew that we've ever had has been pulled out, and permanent seating is gone. The kiosk in the main atrium is gone. We don't have any, I would say, permanent structure in any of our facilities because we want to be able to use any nook and cranny for anything. Again, I reiterate what Doug said about having the relationship. The Beck guys know me, and it is fun. But in the same token, to be the antithesis of what John Paul said, is we push. We push hard when we feel the vision is there. We know what we want. We have the leadership from our pastor on what we believe this facility can do, and we're going to push it. And we're going to lead the site in the direction that we want to go because we feel like we know what we want, and we take people where they need to go. We have tons of questions. I think that's one of the greatest gifts of Ed is when he travels to all these churches, he will pound those pastors on what works at your site, what works at your site, what works at your site, and he comes back and he feeds that into us, and so we have that information to take. And I think what we like and what we've seen at the Gateway campus is just the flexibility of the room. I think if you look at any one room, you need to come at with your worship center and your seating capacity and how you can make that flexible, because if we have a men's conference or we have a weekend attendance, we have one room and we have to get in there, and it's very labor intensive for us, where it doesn't seem so for you guys with the curtains and the way that the sides come in. And that's what we like, is to look at a room and say, okay, now we want to do this in this room, we want to do this in this room, we want to do this in this room, make the room fit 3 different functions, not just one. And I think that's really where our biggest thing is, and stay away from the frills. We're going to design from the inside out. We believe it's about the stage. We're going to take that stage, and from there, that's where all of our efforts and all of our dollars are going to be spent, because that's our pastor. We believe in the music. We believe in the, setting the table for the environment. We do believe in parking. I would say, other than that, it's about parking. Having that environment where people can park and walk to our church with not, we've done the study, and it's not just about counting the cars. Is you need to count from when that person gets in the traffic jam to when they get in the parking space, when they get in the parking space, how long it takes for them to get inside the building. Know how long. And when you go to an environment, go to a sporting arena, decide for yourself what is sitting in a car. When do you start feeling the anxious? Is it 5 minutes? Is it 7 minutes? 15 minutes? When do you start feeling anxious? And that's what we've done. I mean, we'll push you around our church. Actually, you're going to be coming to the same general parking space. Well, we're just moving you just so you're not stuck in a car. And that's some of the type of things that what Doug was talking about. What we push is know that, have your parkers out there counting, have your greeters out there counting, have everybody counting, so you have a true and accurate reflection, and things of that nature is what I'd say.
You're in a really unique position there too, the way you're positioned against 121. You really have a one-way frontage road that runs along the front of the church. I know you have a back road, a very small back road. But you don't have sort of the benefit of like a Gateway church where you have 4 main entries that can go in 4 different directions. I think that additional investment you talked about initially, about where we were going to expand at the Grapevine campus, that was one of those things that we saw immediately. To double to 8,000 seats was going to be incredibly difficult because you didn't have the access. You have 3 entrances basically, so you're going to have 2 in and 1 out, or 1 in and 2 out, or how you're going to focus on that, because we're essentially trapped.
Yeah.
So that's just one of those things that you may not think about on the surface, but after you make that commitment, you purchase that property and you're going, well, it's too late at that point. So site circulation, including the parking, is I'm selling civil, John, is really important.
Yeah, I mean, Doug, and I see it on the 121 or 114 side on them, is the police to work the intersections. I mean, it's all about the dollars, and you want to start paying police to work an intersection for 6 hours a day, and that's just, it's not cheap, and it just keeps going. And you're exactly right, John Paul, with no matter what, how big it is, it all comes down to one funnel, and that's that 121. And we watch the construction. I mean, they've been talking about that for a long time, and we keep hoping for our Texas U-turn, and we think at that time maybe some things can change, but right now it's all funneling into one.
All right. We want to throw it open, questions from the audience here, as well as we have people online that may want to send a question in. So anybody here got any questions for these guys? You can tell a lot of a lot of great experience up here. So, yes, sir.
You guys are talking about new spaces that are part of your campus. What about temporary spaces? Do you go through that first and then move to where you're at?
Yeah, question
Good.
about temporary spaces and how you
Good
use
question.
those.
Well, I'm going to yield to y'all because
No, that was actually, it was a great thing. We were at 2 high schools, and it was really easy. We used a group that came in. It was, I think, Portable Church Industries or whatever, church in a box as we called it, and waking up at 2 in the morning, lugging it all in, and it really did prove successful to have the ground forces there to be able to go to the new facility when we did open it, I think, in a year and a half. So for us, it was. I think we would continue to look at that.
It's a transition.
Yes.
and we are about to we're doing some due diligence right now on another campus in the Metroplex, and once we identify that community, we're gonna do the church in the box component while we develop the facility to support it. So,
And that's what works great about high schools is they have, even the middle schools nowadays with the technology of the auditorium where you can just go right in and cafeterias and whatnot make great preschools.
Yes, sir.
What were your challenges with maintaining your DNA going to a temporary facility?
Challenges, DNA, maintaining that in a temporary site.
It was actually, signage was critical for us, and we would get in quite early in the morning and we would change, and at the time North Dallas High School was really underfunded. We had to bring in AC because the school was built before AC was even part of it, so we had to bring in 80 tons of portable AC every Sunday morning and pipe it in. So I mean, it was getting there at 2 and 4 in the mornings and basically converting the school from hallways down from the band room to signage, and that's what we took, was the same type of graphics that we were producing. We would just triple them. And North Dallas High School was a much newer school, so they had a lot of it, but again, it's signage. But for us, I think Doug hits it, is you got to have the staff. You got to have your campus pastor out front with the same badge that you see in Grapevine shaking hands from our parkers. I mean, that's where church starts from us, is that very first parking sign. That looks the same thing as our Grapevine, and we've changed our vest colors, but at the time it was the orange vest. We want the same orange vest at that street corner as it is in Grapevine, and so everything stays the same.
and some of the DNA are the physical things, the wayfinding, the badges, but most of it for us is behavioral.
People.
It's behavioral DNA that we are more concerned about. So then the facility becomes less of a priority, and it's the behavioral DNA that I'm focusing on.
I was thinking more about programming. If you do specific, like children's programming, it's specifically that you may not have the space for that to do in a temporary facility to do it in something that you can change yourself.
Well, for instance, we do have the curriculum Elevate that our pastor in the Grapevine facility writes for all of our churches. It can be as elaborate as you'd like it, or it could be as small as a TV, and you can just bring that in and you don't have to have the pastoral support. Now, we do have it at all of our campuses, but it could be just a TV where you have the volunteer support staff run the children's program.
Other questions? Sir. Yeah, the question was tips on how to maybe identify the group, to seed the people to the new campus.
For us, it because it's driven by our current attendance. Once that facility opens up, folks find it's a convenience factor. We live in a society that wants it now, a McDonald's society where you drive through, you get what you want. So when it comes to, you were talking about your parking earlier, they don't want to wait. They want it convenient. They want it now. So as far as seeding a church, if it's closer to home, the geography is a driver, yes.
And I mean, there's a lot of promotion from the main campus when we're starting to open it. So the word of mouth will go in the promotion. But for us, we took the dot map and we said, these are those families. We know they're strong with their, volunteering regularly, and we went out to them and we calculated them by their zip code.
Sir.
I'll ask Lynn, and I asked this earlier. You got a facility in Miami. If I went to that facility when I recognize it as your Dallas facility, I know you say with your temporary, the DNA is pretty much the same because you say you do the signage and all that stuff temporarily. Would that be with any of the facilities you guys do?
I would say yes. I would say, when you say recognize it, I think Doug brought up a great point. Is from the actual the people, and that's where our pastor down there, Scott Wilson, is exactly like our pastor Pace Hartfield. Those guys have weekly, whether it's through Polycom or whatever, video conferencing, Streambox, Skype, all those forms. They meet regularly. They know what everything is going on. So if there's a conference going on here, it is one and the same. And now if you're talking about the specific of the font, we use the same font everywhere so that, the Fellowship Church looks like Fellowship Church. We're starting to remove the Dallas and the Miami and the Grapevine. So it's Fellowship Church. It's not Fellowship Church Grapevine. It's Fellowship Church. It's not Fellowship Church Dallas. It's Fellowship Church. So yes, I would hope that when you drive our Dallas campus, you would see the same thing in our Miami campus, from the experience from the Parkers to all the handshakes to when you sit down in the worship experience.
Any other questions? We're about up against time. Awesome. Thanks. Give a hand for the panel here. I think they did a great job.
Thank you.
And again, see their links on the website here. You want to continue the dialogue. I'm sure they'd love to do it. Thanks.